It's a pleasure to welcome Rick Steves back to Dominican to share his new memoir on the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu, and the making of a travel writer. The Leadership Lecture Series is presented by Dominican's Institute for Leadership Studies, a leadership development center offering education, co-curricular experiences, and executive education to inspire degree-seeking students and professionals to become better leaders and team members. We thank Executive Director and Professor Dr. Denise Lucy for founding and leading its lecture series through its 20 years at Dominican. Our partners for the Leadership Lecture Series are Elaine and Bill Betricelli, founders of Book Passage, and their incredible team. We thank Elaine, Bill, and the entire staff at Book Passage for their vision and commitment to education and community building. Thank you to our Dominican students, faculty, and staff dedicating their evening to serve as leadership host ambassadors and welcome you to this event. Finally, we thank our generous sponsors who've made tonight's event possible. Our diamond sponsor for this year's entire lecture series is Christine Christensen of Compass, who has represented Marin's luxury real estate market for more than 20 years. Thank you, Christine, for generously supporting the lecture series and being a dynamic alumna of Dominican's MBA program. Our silver sponsors are Redwood Credit Union. Thank you. Thank you for many years of partnership and support, and the Dominican Women's Leadership and Philanthropy Council. We appreciate your enthusiastic participation in Dominican's programs. And now, I'm thrilled to introduce Rick Steves, travel guru extraordinaire and author, sharing his new memoir, On the Hippie Trail. Rick is taking you on a fascinating virtual trip to Istanbul and Kathmandu. So let's get started and welcome Rick Steves to our stage. Rick?
Whoa, what a beautiful spot to share a great travel adventure. So nice. I love this. Okay, well, I've been just having so much fun going around the country talking about my Hippie Trail experience, because this is the most bizarre thing. And I'm going to tell you about how I wrote this journal before I was, oh, you're all taking pictures. Okay, I'm going to just pause it. Take pictures. Okay, I'm going to come over here, here, and there. Okay, get your pictures. Okay, and then here. Ready? I'll get some light on my face. There you go. Good, and here. There you go. Okay, and then over here if there's any photographs. There you go. Good. This is what I do as a tour guide. Okay, you got your pictures. Put your cameras away and enjoy the music. Okay. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you on this trip from Istanbul to Kathmandu. Then we're going to take about a 3-minute stretch. And then we're going to talk about how this experience contributed to what I've done since then. Because I've had a pretty good run as a travel writer. And I wrote this before I was a travel writer when I was a piano teacher, okay? And this was the book that came out about 3 weeks ago. And my publisher had me going all over the country talking to great independent bookstore crowds like Book Passage. And I've been talking to groups of people that have already bought the book, which is really strange for me because I've got nothing to sell. You've already got it, so that's great. And for you guys, I actually autographed them in advance. When Elaine asked me, I literally autographed every one of those book plates on my kitchen table, and now the book's worth just as much as it was before, actually. So, but I've been going around the country, and the idea is, if everybody buys the book at the same time, it boosts you up, and my publisher really wanted to see Rick Steves on the New York Times bestseller list. And this was the first title, and I think if you look carefully on the very top, you can see the new cover. I don't know. What do you guys have? Does it? No, so you've got the collector's item, okay? You've got the collector's item there. But thank you. Thank you very much for traveling with me. And, you know, first of all, I was a piano teacher. My dad was a piano tuner. He started importing pianos from Europe to Seattle. We went over to see the piano factories. My students wouldn't practice in the summer. I said, I'm not going to struggle with that. I'll see you in September. I'm going to Europe, and we'll get back into the school year when it happens. Every year I was traveling and learning, and I was having, when I look at this young kid here, he's a third my age right now, all right? And the world was my playground. It was so great, and I had this passion for journaling, and it was the weirdest thing. Before every trip, I would buy a hardbound 200-page empty book. That's what we called it, an empty book. It's really almost exactly like what you're holding, hardbound but empty. And I would then diligently journal. Now, I did that every summer. I've got 7 of these empty books that I wrote, each one about 60,000 words. That's how many words are in this thing. And I just did it for myself. It was a selfish activity. And I feel it's kind of like netting butterflies, if you're into butterflies. If you're into travel, you want to capture those magic moments. In my business, we call it magic moments. We want to fill a tour with magic moments, you know. And when you're traveling, they're just fluttering by. And they flutter and then they're out of your life forever. And you forget about them. And I love to just net them with my pencil, and I put them into the book. And that's my souvenir, you see. And I think there's some real good value in journaling. It makes you be in the moment. It makes you write it down and think about what it meant. At night, you kind of consider what you've experienced. There's so many healthy things about journaling, and I really loved that. So I was strangely diligent about writing a journal. On my very, very first trip when I was 18, first trip away without parents, I actually journaled, and my buddy Gene, who was my sidekick on this trip, when we graduated from high school, the day after graduation, we went to Europe with the Eurail Pass and did the 10-week whirlwind tour of Europe. Great trip. Arthur Fromer was saying $5 a day. That was way too much money. We did it on $2.50 a day. And here's proof of it. The last 2 pages of my journal when I was 18, I like an accountant, I listed every night's sleep and how much it cost. Our average night cost, it says right here, 70 nights in Europe, average 84 cents a night. $114 spent between the 2 of us for a 10-week trip. You'd have a tough time doing that today. You'd have a tough time finding one room for that cost of a whole summer of travel. But I was doing that. That was our trip back when we were 18 years old and we were trucking. And back then I didn't know about packing light. For years, I came to Book Passage, and it was all about packing light, wasn't it, Elaine? And we were selling those bags so people could pack light because it's as big as you could carry in the airplane. That bag there was as big a backpack I could find, and I laid awake at night thinking of ways to fill it. I had capacity. I wanted to use it, you know. Well, that was the trip when I was just out of high school with my buddy Gene, and on the flight home, we actually did a freeze, we called it, and we designed it around a train line, and every momentous, mind-blowing, perspective-broadening experience we had, we documented on there, and it just was a delightful trip as teenagers. And then 5 years later, we were both finishing college. Gene graduated from Stanford right around here, and I graduated from the UW, and I whispered in Gene's ear, "Go east, young man, go east." I wanted my buddy to go with me. I wanted a partner to go from Istanbul to Kathmandu. And I'd been to Istanbul several times, but beyond Istanbul, 500 years ago when they had the maps of the Atlantic, don't go out there, there's dragons. It was that kind of thing. So we headed east from Istanbul, and I remember when we did that, it occurred to me not a single soul knows I even exist between here and Seattle. And I didn't know a single soul between Istanbul and Seattle. And there was no internet, no parental safety net. It was just a few traveler's checks in your money belt, your buddy, and a goal. Kathmandu, the end of the hippie rainbow, all right? And this is what kids did. This is what kids did. It was a thing in the 1960s and 70s that it was the ultimate hippie road trip. Not that I was any classic hippie, but it was the Beatles were hanging out in India with the Maharishi Yogi, you know, and it just turned out that the year we did it, it was perfect in our lifetime. We were both just out of college, and it was the last year you could do it. The next year, the Shah fell, and Ayatollah Khomeini came over from Paris and turned Iran into a theocracy that we have to this day. The next year, the USSR invaded Afghanistan and turned it into a terrible war zone, and there was just no more Hippie Trail. So we did it on the last year you could do it. I documented it with the journal, and I had beautiful penmanship back then. Who is this guy? I can't even read my writing now. And I was so into the journaling that 3/4 of the way through the trip, I had a little note to myself, stop, figure out the page count, and see if you need to have a smaller font going forward. Because it would be so frustrating to be 3 days before the end of your trip and run out of pages, you see. So I could kind of calibrate it, so I just finished with a full book. Okay, well, a lot of people write journals, but a lot of people don't photograph it really well at the same time without realizing that 40 years later this might come in handy. So I had the classic Pentax K1000 totally manual camera that travelers had, and we had 15 rolls of 36 frames canisters, and the only address I remember from the 1970s is Page Mill Road, Palo Alto, where you got your film processed if you lived up in Seattle, okay? Page Mill Road, because you would come home from a trip with your precious canisters, and you didn't know if they were going to be any good or not. You didn't know if your finger was in front of the lens the whole time until you sent it down to Page Mill Road, and then a couple weeks later you got your yellow box back, and you open it up, and oh, they're great, you know. So I had these photographs. I had this journal intimately capturing every moment of this trip, and then I forgot about it. And I probably read 5 or 6 pages out of it, and then it was out of my life for 40 years. COVID hits, got some time on my hands, get out the old journal, read it. It was really good. I mean, it was candid, it was rough. It was an anthropological dig into a 23-year-old version of myself. It was trippy because I didn't remember this stuff, but when I read it, it kindled those memories. So we had all of that, and then it was there. After I started writing guidebooks, I didn't have the bandwidth to do journals anymore. So I was done journaling, and then I started writing all of these guidebooks. And, you know, that was a lot of work. So the journals went by the wayside, and I still have that little black Moleskine book. Any of you that are travel writers and so on know, you just have a little notebook in your pocket, and you net those butterflies as they go by. Anything that happens, boom, you write it down. I've got my Moleskine right with me now because day after tomorrow I'm flying to Rome to meet my TV crew, and then we're going to Istanbul. And you can bet I'm going to be netting those beautiful moments and writing them down and working them into a TV show or a guidebook or whatever. So I think I've been in this room 10, 20 years ago actually talking about the skills of European travel. And if you're here to listen and learn about trip planning, packing, safety, communication, transportation, eating, sleeping, or avoiding crowds, that's the talk I gave twice today at the convention center in Santa Clara, thank you. And I'll be doing that again tomorrow. That's what I normally do, but it's fun right now not to do that. But I do want to remind you, if you'd like to have that lecture, we turned it into a 1-hour TV show that's been airing all over the country. It just came out last month. It's called Experiencing Europe, and you can watch that on public television if you're a supporter of KQED, right? And if you're not a supporter of KQED, just between you and me, you can see every show I ever made for free on my website, okay? So you can just go there too. But bottom line for me, I'd like you to have that information. I've got 100 hours of travel information and TV shows and lectures, all for free on my website. So if you want me to talk about different things, you've got it there. I mean, you name it, it's there if you want anything. But today, we're going to talk about Istanbul to Kathmandu, we worked on the subtitle, and I wanted people to know it's not just on the Hippie Trail. I wanted people to know where it was, Istanbul to Kathmandu. We needed something a little more. And we came up with the making of a travel writer. I just love that idea because that's what this was when I look back on it. My mindset was, I am a piano teacher. I loved it. I was so thankful to be a piano teacher. I had 50 wonderful students. My girlfriend was a piano teacher. We were going to get married and move our grand pianos together. You know how they can kind of fit? It was going to be a delightful suburban Seattle world, and I would have my students. But this was planting the seeds for me to make a different turn in my life. So we're going to go now on this trip, and I'm just going to be talking about the trip, and then after our little stretch, we'll talk about how some of those things ended up flowering, I think, in the 40 years since when I've been a travel writer instead of just this piano teacher on the Hippie Trail. So we went through Yugoslavia and Bulgaria during communism times. That in itself was quite exciting. And we get to Istanbul. And I love Istanbul because it's where Asia and Europe come together. It's where Christendom and Islam come together. It's where so much is happening. And there was like 300 or 400 years when Istanbul was the most important city in Europe. After the Western Roman Empire fell, it lived on there. And it's just a great city. We do 40 different itineraries on my Rick Steves Europe tour program. There's 4 itineraries that are just 1 week in a great city. And the 4 cities, in my estimate, that deserve a 1-week tour, focus just on that city, kind of predictable, Paris, London, and Rome. And then number 4, just as good as the other 3, Istanbul. Istanbul, to me, is a great travel destination. And it was great back then, and it's great today. It just is thriving with life. And you get lost in these seas of people, which to me, the little minibus crosses between a taxi and a bus is called a dolmuş. And if you've traveled in Turkey, you know that means squished. They just call it squished. It is so packed with people. It is the dolmuş. But what the hippies remember is a little cafeteria pudding shop called the Pudding Shop. And that's where everybody would gather and share information. The pudding shop is there to this day. I recommend it in my Istanbul guidebook. And it's a delightful gathering place for travelers. Back then, this was really important. There was no internet. There was no way for people to communicate, really. And it just had an iconic bulletin board. And that's where people would see who's going what, what's the news, who got arrested, what's it like in Afghanistan. All of this kind of information was right there. So we didn't have a lot of information. And, I'm really passionate about the value of travel information. And I wonder, why am I so excited about the value of travel information? And again, if I look back on it, I can see the kernels of this passion I have now in that Hippie Trail trip. In the last quarter of my University of Washington days, I took a class in the free college there called the Experimental College, where an old hippie was teaching all of the backpackers how to do the Hippie Trail. It was perfect, the answer to a prayer. I have all day Saturday with this guy. He's done it. He's going to give me all the information. I paid for it. I sat there. I was primed, and he just phoned it in. It was the most pathetic excuse of a class, and I was actually angry. And I don't get angry that much, but he had that information. There was 20 people who had this opportunity to do this. It was scary. And he didn't have the decency as a travel teacher to take a few hours and get it together and share that information in a serious way. I got nothing out of that class. And then we're over there. There's no good guidebook for this trip. Gene and I had one map. That was it. We'd open up the map every few days and see how much farther we have to go. We didn't measure it in kilometers to Kathmandu. We measured it in borders yet to cross. Borders were the stressful thing, you see, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. But when we were on the bus, I would literally go up and down the aisle. Anybody who spoke English or French or German, I would just say, do you have any information? Can I borrow it for a couple hours? And I would read it on the bus just because you were hungry for some information. And when I got home, I took with it that appreciation of other people's need for travel information and the ethical responsibility of anybody who cares about travel to, if they have that experience, to share it in a good way. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but this was a cottage industry. This was a tourism thing, the Hippie Trail. There was a lot of buses going. And I like this photograph here because it makes my tours seem very comfortable. But this is a group of kids that booked onto this big truck, open-top truck with all their backpacks and their tents, and they headed east. And it had big wheels, and they were off-road, and it was just an adventure. I didn't want to do that. I didn't even know it was an option. I was glad we just ad-libbed it on public transportation with locals, not with other tourists. But that would have been pretty cool also. People have asked me as I've gone around the country giving this talk, what about women? Could women do this thing? And I remember, it seems like plenty of women who were, from Britain or Australia or Germany or the United States or Canada. But if you look here, half of the people are women. It's men and women doing this trip. I'm inspired to give this talk, and the takeaway of the book is, and we'll talk more about it later, but anybody can have their hippie trail experience, and you don't need to be a young man. You don't need to go through Afghanistan and Iran. You can have that get away from home thing. That's the whole idea. Get away from home. You learn more about your home sometimes by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. I love the idea that the Prophet Muhammad said you should all go to Mecca. That was one of the 5 pillars, or it is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. I've talked to my Muslim friends about this, and they explained to me it wasn't that important to go to Mecca. It was important to leave your home and understand what the world's all about. I love that. And Muhammad said, don't tell me how educated you are. Tell me how much you've traveled. So this kind of stuff, I was learning it on the road. So we just took a bus out of Istanbul. And I'll never forget, there's a lot of adulting when you're going across Asia on the Hippie Trail. You got to worry about getting your shots. You got to worry about getting your visas. You got to worry about buying your tickets. You got to worry about dodging big festivals if you can't get any transportation connections and so on. We bought our bus ride. We thought we had a real reputable bus company. We were seat 7, or row 7, seats A and B. We're at the bus tour lot there, and the bus pulls up, he opens the door, and all the people going to Tehran stampeded onto the bus, climbing over each other. And Gene and I go, what's going on? How uncivilized. We're in row 7, seats A and B. What could go wrong? So everybody is calmed down. Finally, we walk onto the bus, and at row 3, it occurs to us, the numbers have nothing to do with anything. There's 2 seats for us somewhere on this bus. We were the last people on, and they jerry-rigged these 2 collapsible seats over the stairwell in the back, the only 2 seats on the bus that did not fold back at all, right on top of something really noisy and hot, and is like hellish seats on a hellish bus. And for 2 days, I would sit bolt upright on this. Every time I got up to stretch, the driver would see me in the mirror, and he had a thing about me, and he just would yell, "Mister, sit down!" So I couldn't stretch, really, and it turned into an odyssey. The driver, we gave him a nickname. We called him the Pirate. And he was not a polite man, but he was a good driver. And after driving all day, he needed to go sleep in the back, so he turned the wheel over to the first mate. And I remember the first mate, you'll read about in the book, but before the Pirate had gotten all the way settled in the back, the first mate had run off the road. And I just remember opening my eyes to people screaming and billowing smoke and sparks, and I was just thinking, this is going to be a short trip, I'm afraid. But what it did was it just delayed us for a day as we got it out of the gutter and went to the mechanic place to get it fixed. And then the Pirate really realized there's no schedule anymore. We'll get there when we do. And we started spending the night in rundown little hotels. And one day, for some reason, he just got in his mind that everybody was starting to be stinky. And he stopped the bus, and he went into the river and took a bath. And he said, "Everybody into the river. No bath, no Tehran." So at night, we would gather in our hotels, and we would think, what are the chances we're actually going to get to Tehran? It really became, everything unfolded, and it became quite an odyssey. It was just a fascinating, when I think back on it, it was an amazing experience. And we had, it's kind of a culture when you're doing this. And when I look back on it, it's like we were privileged suburban kids in a very wealthy part of the world, and our lives were pretty predictable. And we were sort of romanticizing poverty. We just wanted to be poor. We wanted to be close to the ground. There was something exciting about not knowing where your next bed was going to be, because it was so opposite of what our lives were. I think when I look back on it, I try to understand what was the attraction, because it was not comfortable. I mean, our major thing we talked about was we could still go back to Greece. You know, we knew 2 days that way, all the kids were having a party on a Greek island. It would have been great. But what are we doing? We're going the wrong direction. And then 3 days, and then 4 days, we kept thinking, you know, in a couple of days of hard travel, we could be on Mykonos with all the cute girls, and everything would be just a happy European adventure, you know. But no, we were hell-bent on going east to get to India. There was something really free about sleeping on the ground, something really free about not knowing where you're going to be tomorrow night, something really memorable about having the worst conceivable hotels you could ever imagine. Dirt floors, no windows, no locks. I remember in one hotel, it was clear that they didn't change the sheets from the person that was there last night. So I went and I asked the man, I said, my sheet is dirty from yesterday's traveler. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. And he went to the room and he turned the sheet over. So I don't know, did that affect me as a tour operator? Did I actually want to inflict unforgettably bad accommodations on people so they would be more thankful when they got home? There is a little bit of that. I mean, I'm thankful for having had that experience. I'm thankful for not knowing where I'm going to be tomorrow night. It's thought-provoking to me how people cannot relax when they don't know where they're going to be sleeping tonight. You know, I used to do tours just to challenge myself without reservations. I would do tours, 20 people on the bus. Every year I would do a fundraising tour where all the money would go to Bread for the World, and I would, as a reward for that, take people on a tour, thinking, I'm not making any money, so nobody can complain. That didn't work. They complained. But I really enjoyed having to scramble and find 20 beds every night. I didn't know where we were going to be in 2 nights. We were just playing it by ear. And I learned as a tour guide, my American travelers could not focus on what I was saying after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon if we didn't know where we're going to be tonight. It's fascinating to me how callous they could be about homelessness in general on the planet. But if they were going to be homeless for 1 night, that would be a very, very serious issue that had to be dealt with right now, you see. So there was a lot of learning about this on the road. We finally got to Iran. And when I think about that, I'm always fascinated to look back on my early trips and to realize how green and oblivious and naive I was about world politics, about structural poverty, about just the ways of the world. And I was just, I was more interested in getting a nice pomegranate juice. That was really something that was very exciting for me, not wondering about, well, what's the state of democracy in Lebanon this year? But now when I travel, I'm more tuned into that. So when I look back on it, in Iran, this was the last year of the Shah. Since then, I've done a TV show about Iran, and I've learned a lot about Iran. But back then, I didn't know if the Shah was good or bad. I didn't understand the context at all. But I remember going to the market and seeing when you have a dictator, have you ever noticed how dictators like their pictures everywhere? Even if they weren't on the cover of the magazine, they got to have their, if they're on Time magazine, they put it up on the wall, right? If they weren't on Time magazine, they put themselves on Time magazine and put them up on the wall. It's what a dictator does. Well, when you go to the market, whenever you're in a country where there's a dictator, you see that person's portrait. And I remember in the market in Tehran, it was very cheap glass. And felt like it was on little rusted tacks, and it was ready to crash to the ground with one little tremor, and all those cheap frames would break into shards of glass on the ground. That was my image of the Shah in 1978, the year before he fell. And then I saw these guys. When I look at these guys, these are the guys that were clenching their fist and saying death to America for Ted Koppel on the hostage crisis. Look at them here. They're not quite as angry. And in retrospect, I learned that the whole hostage crisis thing was a media stunt. They paid these guys, put them on buses, and took them to the place in front of the embassy. And they positioned them so it looked like they were much more than what the camera could show. And they just framed it in a way it looks like there's thousands of people going death to America. But it was all a political circus. I mean, I don't want to excuse it, but it was hyped up. And when you go there, you kind of start to wonder, was I duped by all of this? Or how honest is news coverage? And it's so great for us to get a chance to get out there and actually see the world firsthand. Oh man, it was just great. And then we got to the most godforsaken place I've ever been, the border of Iran and Afghanistan. I think a lot about borders. It can be a river, it can be a ridge, it can be an island, it can be a straight line drawn by some colonial power far, far away, which sows the future of all sorts of heartbreak. Or it can just be one tribe kind of peters out, and then there's land that nobody wants, and another tribe peters in, you see. And that's kind of how I saw with Persians and Afghanis, okay? And when you got to that place where the border was, you understood why this is a border. Why would anybody want this? And there would be one border here and one border there in a no man's land. And this must have been between the two borders because these guys are hiking across. And usually the public transportation peters out at the border. You do your nitty-gritty, your bookwork, and you cross the border. And then in the next country, you pick up a minibus to go to the first town. And then you got major transportation again. So this was the border of Afghanistan. And I remember the hard pan countryside, and it was flat. There was no hills. It was littered with rusted, disassembled VW buses, just abandoned by the hippies. And the border guards there, the customs people decided, we think there's some marijuana on here, and they took the whole bus apart, and the people just said, screw it, let's go. And they left their bus there because they didn't put it back together, apparently. We would wait in the waiting rooms, and there were these cloudy glass cases that were like museum display cases featuring the sorry plight of Western hippies that tried to smuggle drugs across this border, where they tried to hide something, what it was, and where they're in prison now. That kind of, what was the movie? Midnight Express. This is Midnight Express time, you see. And you got the stressful moment where you have to show your yellow international certificate of vaccination. I remember back then, you always called it the yellow international certificate of vaccination. I don't know why, and you had the yellow international certificate of vaccination in your passport. To go to France, to Spain, if you didn't have a certain shot, you'd be in there, or you couldn't cross the border. You had to have it to get back to the United States, and sometimes if you had to have that shot to prove you had it. Well, every border you had to have certain shots. At this border, my friend Gene, for some reason, his yellow international certificate of vaccination was not up to date. He needed a shot, so we had to wait around for a couple hours. The nurse or the doctor comes, and I remember sitting in the waiting room, kind of like a mother with my child, and loving and nervous and all that. And then he goes into the next room, and he opens his shoulder. And I remember looking, kind of peering through there. It was backlit. It was actually quite dramatic lighting. And I remember the needle bending as they tried to put it into his arm. And I just thought, I'm so thankful that my yellow international certificate. Oh, baby. This was a border crossing, and every time you got through a border, when you approached the border, you wouldn't put your bag up on the rooftop because people could put something in there that you could be framed for. So you took the bag down and you have it on your lap, and you don't let anybody near it for the last 2 hours. You go through it. So there's no little cigarette or something in there because they don't really want to throw you in jail. They just want to find a little bit of pot so they can take half of your money. So you're just scared. And we didn't have enough cushion to do that very often, you see. When you crossed the border, you had to change money. And you don't know what color the currency is this year in Afghanistan. They might have some brown currency they're selling, and the light blue stuff is what's in currency now. And last year, the brown went out of shape, out of currency, out of circulation. And if you got a bunch of brown money from last year, what are you going to do? Sell it to a hippie. They don't know. and they give you, you know, a $100 bill, and you got all these Afghanis or whatever it's called, and you try to sell it, and it's worthless. So there were all of these little, you know, stupid, corrupt pitfalls that awaited you with each border. So we got through that border. We loaded up onto buses. I never thought that shot would be on the cover of a book. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. But we headed east. The first town in Afghanistan was Herat, H-E-R-A-T, Herat. And we got about 2 hours from the border toward Herat. Suddenly the van stops. The first mate turns around and he pulls out this big knife. And it was like a Bowie knife. You know, if you read the Davy Crockett or Daniel Boone stories and the Alamo and everything, big, shiny blade. And he looked at us and he said in his broken English, "The cost for your ride to Herat has just doubled." And it was going to go from like $1.50 to $3. And we go, "No, you can't do this. That's not right. We will not stand for this. This is just, it's going to ruin your tourist trade in the future. You've got to earn our respect." And I remember a very thoughtful Indian gentleman turns around and goes, "Oh, no. It's a very good idea if we just pay for this. We would be very disappointed if one of us got hurt because of this. It's not that much money. Think about this. We want to get to Herat today, not tomorrow. Please." So, you know, he was right. We all paid, and then we made it to Herat. Forget my subtitle just for a minute. Herat is a beautiful town. During the war, it got bombed, and I remember just being heartbroken because I really kind of fell in love with Herat. Herat is where Gene and I realized we're going to India. There's no way we're going to turn back now. This was the point of no return. We suffered through that last crossing, and now we could almost smell India. India was home for us. We don't know why, but that's where we were going. So we got to Herat and settled in. At this point, we decided for our own sanity, we're going to bump it up a little bit. We're going to stay in nicer hotels. We stayed in Herat. Every town had a hotel where the wedding parties were. And, you know, in a godforsaken little corner of some depressed little country, you have one wedding class hotel. And that's where we wanted to stay. It had a swimming pool. It had some kind of security to keep beggars out, where people from the developed world could be not pestered and know that their water was properly filtered and so on. And you could eat in their restaurant. That was our new bar, just so we could get through this thing. Because we were sick a lot. If you read the book, you'll find Gene was sick half the time, it seems like. They say on the Hippie Trail, there's two kinds of travelers, those who know they have worms and those who don't know they have worms. And we knew Gene had worms, all right? So we're in Herat, and we're in a good mood, and I figure, okay, Gene, I'm ready. Let's smoke some marijuana. Now, I was like the nice kid in high school that doesn't want to throw his or her virginity away. They want to do it in a way they'll feel good about themselves tomorrow morning. I had that attitude with marijuana. I never smoked pot in college. Most of my friends did, but I just didn't want to succumb to peer pressure. I wanted to feel good about it. And if ever you could feel good with that attitude about smoking marijuana, it would be in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, it's, you know, people drink wine here, they smoke pot there. That was my impression anyways. It was just what you did. It felt great. Now, Gene warned me that you don't always get high on your first time, so don't be too disappointed. And we decided it's better if we don't smoke out in the street, but smoke in our hotel room. I mean, think of, what's her name, Brittany Griner. She had just a little bit of marijuana, and that was tragedy. The same thing happens to travelers all over the world when it comes to this weed. So we're in the room, and Gene is more experienced than me, so he goes and buys it, and he knows how to roll it and everything, and we smoke, and then I'm looking at the naked light bulb hanging from the ceiling, and I'm just thinking, yeah, is that breathing? I can see it going in and out. And then we smoked more. I think I might be getting high. How did cockroaches get their name anyways? Cockroach. And then I remember I went up on the rooftop. And rooftops are a cool thing back then for budget travel. If you hang out in Athens, you know, you'd sleep on the rooftop and so on. Went up onto the rooftop, marveling at the brightness of the stars, and all of a sudden there's a man in a beautiful robe next to me, and he's in charge of cleaning up the place, and we're both just marveling how beautiful this world is, and the stars twinkling. And then down below, the chariots. In Herat, there was two-wheeled wagons behind a fast horse, and they were just charged through the city, chariots like that. And after dark, they had their torches, and these chariots were going all over the place like fireflies with their torches. And the stars were twinkling. And I was just thinking, I think I'm high. I think it's very... But from this point onward in the journal, I remember reading it thinking, was it really that good? You know? So I don't know. I honestly don't know where I was high and where I wasn't in my accounts. But either way, it was really good. When we walked in Herat, I remember there was a rhythm. Every 5 paces, you'd have a different vignette of life. It was the most beautiful thing. And you could never walk down the same street twice. It was always new every time you walked. You didn't need turnstiles. You didn't need a guidebook. You just needed a curiosity and a fun-loving sort of willingness to be an extrovert and so on. And I remember just marveling at the beauty of tradition, the nobility of hard work, where somebody can do what their father and their grandfather did and not be ashamed that they're not doing something more important. It all worked together. It was a fabric of society that I think, I don't want to romanticize, simple, poor towns, but there was something really beautiful about it. And I was just enamored with walking through the city. Every 5 paces, there was a different, really cool scene. And I could have stayed in Herat for a long, long time. We could rent bikes and marvel at the painted trucks. But then we moved along, and we got the nicest bus company, Qadari Bus. And back then, there was just one paved road across Afghanistan. And it was either paid for by the Russians or the Americans, I forget. But there was that tug-of-war over who's going to have the thankfulness from the community. And it occurred to us at this point, there was 50 people, we took bus rides earlier. We knew 30 or 40 of these hippies. And we saw them for the rest of our trip. We all just scattered, but there was just this one ribbon that everybody did. And you kept bumping into each other. It was fascinating how it's a huge world, and we had this little class of whatever month we left, and we kept seeing each other all along the way. Well, Jean and I think we were the only tourists on this bus. It was an all-day trip across Afghanistan from Herat to Kabul. And my takeaway here was monochrome world. Everything was just this color. Everything was that color. A town, it's that color, just growing out of it like a sandcastle. A cemetery, I remember fascinating cemeteries with the Muslim pillars and just that same color. When we did rest stops, the bus driver would just stop. And men would go here and women would go there. Everybody would pile off of the bus, and the men would just pee, and the ladies, they had these big dark dress robes, and they'd all squat, and they had these privacy tents around them. And I remember looking at it, and it was like a chessboard or the Mad Tea Hatters or something like that. And they were all just there, all of these very modest, very, very, what do you call it, devout Muslim women. And then they would all be done. They'd walk back onto the bus, and it was just all wet. And then other times we'd stop when it was time to pray. And you just stop the bus, everybody gets out, they unroll their little prayer mats, prayer rugs, and they face Mecca, and they do their stretching, and they think about God. It's a beautiful thing. And then on the bus, well, when we stopped for actual tea break or something, you didn't know what was going to be happening, but every stop was full of memories. This one, they're skinning a goat. You just stop your bus. What are you going to do? Have a cup of tea and watch them skin this goat? The driver, I noticed, was in the back room passing around a pipe, getting really high. The half-hour break became an hour break. And finally he comes out, just glassy-eyed as can be, and he goes, okay, onto the bus. We're going to Kabul. All right. This little girl just stared at me for hours. Hours, literally. I was just the most interesting thing that had come into her life in a long, long time. Where was I from? What was I doing here? Who am I? How did I get here? Where am I going? What language do I speak? And she'd heard all about people from far away, but now she had one sitting right across from her. And this girl stared at me also. So we just didn't worry. We just stared at each other. We were both interested in each other. I was staring at her mother also. It really is obviously a man's world, and the Taliban is implementing that right now, where women don't get to have education, where women have to be covered when they go out. It's really tough to see that. And I understand women kind of wear the pants behind the walls in the domestic scene. That's the woman's domain. But out in public, women are covered up and men are everywhere. Kabul, my takeaway from Kabul was Afghanistan doesn't seem to fit a modern style city, but it needed one to be a country, to relate to other countries or have a banking system, or I don't know. And I just didn't really think Kabul was a very nice town. I remember Jean was sick, so I was just roaming around on my own. I went to a cafeteria where the backpackers all went for lunch. I sat down and a man joined me. And I'll never forget, he said, can I join you? I said, you already have. And he said, are you from America? I said, yes. He said, well, I'm a professor here in Afghanistan, and I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with spoons and forks like you do. A third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with their fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same. That rings in my ear right now. We're all civilized just the same. This isn't the same man here. I don't have a picture of the actual guy, but this man that sat down there was a leader in his community. And he was so hung up on this point that he interrupted his day routinely to sit with a tourist and give this little bit of wisdom. And I thought, he really thinks I think less of him because he eats with his fingers. And then I realized he was right. I thought less of him. And they've got a drawer with a bunch of rusty old utensils, and you can shovel your food into your mouth with a metal thing if you want to. But it's just more elegant and more holistic and more close to God to eat with your fingers like God intended you to. You see, that's just a beautiful thing. We don't have to do that, but it's nice to know that it's not less civilized. It's a cultural thing, and these are little examples that humble my ethnocentricity. We're in a stage right now on my country. I've been trying to put it together, but I like to have everybody live and let live. And if one person says, you're doing it different than me and you're not supposed to do it that way, it just seems needlessly aggressive. And one thing you learn when you travel is there's room for everybody to do it a little bit different. In fact, that's fun. We can celebrate that diversity. On my next trip to India, I remember I actually made a point to eat with my fingers. And all over India, I went to quality restaurants with quality local clientele, professional people, no spoons and forks, but a ceremonial sink in the middle of the room. They would wash their hands, eat with their fingers, and then wash their hands again and be on their way. And I did it, and it became quite natural. In fact, I almost had to be retrained when I got home, all right? It's just fun. That's a beautiful thing about travel. Okay, from there we head east over Khyber Pass. And remember when we were chasing Osama bin Laden and they were hiding out in these mountains between Pakistan and Kabul? To this day, those are called the ungovernable territories or something like that. Way back when we were doing this, 20 years before 9/11, it was the ungovernable territories. These were hard scrabble, angry little warlords that you had to pay. When we bought the bus ticket to go through there, it came with a $2 extra fee to guarantee safe crossing. It was something like that. It was the trip is $3, but there's $2 extra to guarantee safe crossing. You're not going to say, can I get a student discount? You got to pay that, And then you'll go over there and you see the guys who are getting that money, and they're letting us go through. And it's a lot like the Rhine River 800 years ago. They had all those robber baron castles, and you had to work your way through all those customs and duties and borders and all of that stuff. Fascinating to be able to travel in the world and to be reminded we're all on different parallel evolutionary tracks. Some societies are ahead of us in certain ways, some are behind, some are moving quickly, some are having setbacks, but we're all trying to move it forward. It's a very interesting thing when we think about, I'm sort of into this concept of chronocentrism lately. We all know we don't want to be ethnocentric. It's not like the world's a pyramid with us on top and everybody else trying to figure it out. We're all civilized just the same, even though we do things differently. That's a fundamental thing you learn when you leave home. It's one of the great reasons to leave home and look at it from a distance. Chronocentrism is looking at everything through the sensibilities of 2025 eyes. I'm so thankful we are as tuned in and sensitive as we are today as a society about things that are very, very important. But I'm pretty adamant about not condemning people that are not as evolved as us on that because they lived 200 years before us, you see. I don't want to excuse the lack of political correctness of them, but I don't want to condemn them for that because they were on that evolutionary track. There are people today that are way behind us in 2025. We've had our revolution, we've had our Reformation, we've had our Vatican II, we've had our civil rights movement, we've had our women's suffragette, we've had all of these things to help us move forward, and other societies have a tougher time. And it feels to me, rather than hit people and make them be like us, we can allow them to evolve on their terms, and that will be more constructive. But that's a little more nuanced than what we're able to do in a land that just likes bumper stickers and angry news sources. But when you travel, you think about these things. So I'm thinking about these guys. It looks like almost a kid's fortress, but these were adults with their wind-tattered flags. And these were the same people that harbored Osama bin Laden, that so frustrated us 20 years later. You gotta imagine the people of Afghanistan. They almost ruined the Soviet Union when the Russians tried to take them over. Remember what a fiasco that was for Russia? We spent $2 trillion, $2,000 billion trying to pound them into submission. These guys. What could we have done with $2 trillion apart from that? We could have conquered hunger on this planet. America would have been beloved. Everybody else would have their own Defense for America departments. Talk about goodwill, talk about soft power. But what did we do? We spent that $2 trillion, $2,000 billion to make us less safe because it wasn't very good for our image. These are the thoughts you have when you travel. This is why Thomas Jefferson said travel makes a person wiser if less happy. Oh, baby. This is why I love my work. I work with 100 people in Seattle. Our mission is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. Go to Orlando 3 or 4 times. Then go to Cancun, go to Vegas, and then go back to Cancun, and then take a Caribbean cruise, never leave the ship, and then go back to Disneyland. I don't care. But sooner or later, go to Portugal. Get a passport. Do something that gets you out of your comfort zone. Stop avoiding culture shock. Culture shock is why we travel. Culture shock is a constructive thing. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective, right? It makes the world a safer place. It's a beautiful thing. Because you gain an appreciation of people we're not supposed to appreciate when you get over there and you meet them. So we're going east, and we're at one more border. You want to buy some cocaine? This was a ballsy photograph to take this. You got customs officials, you got soldiers, you got cops, you got sleazy con men, And then you got this clown trying to sell a tourist cocaine. Right there, with everybody gathered around waiting to see if I'm going to make the transaction. And I just kind of go, please, go, leave me alone. I just want to cross Khyber Pass and get to India. But when he was gone, I remember this windowsill there. It was a beautiful thing. The window collapsed into the wall. I could sit there like Mona Lisa. See how she has her arms on a windowsill like this, looking out at that beautiful Mona Lisa backyard. And I could just watch the beautiful countryside go by with a big window and the wind in my hair. And, well, there was a little bit of yesterday's vomit still crusted on the outside of the bus that they didn't clean off. But apart from that, it was a beautiful, beautiful situation. So we headed east and we crossed Khyber Pass. And I remember looking here, there was a mugginess to the east. And it occurred to me, I know I'm able to put it into words better now than I was then, but I've always been fascinated by tectonic plates. Geologically, that's where two big pieces of the world, Earth, come together. That's where you've got earthquakes and volcanoes and all sorts of excitement. Iceland is where Europe and America meet geologically. You can straddle the two continents if you know where to go in Iceland, okay? Well, right here, it was a cultural tectonic plate. I love when cultural tectonic plates and geological tectonic plates kind of come together. Morocco and the Rock of Gibraltar is kind of like that. They say on the top of the Rock of Gibraltar, it's the only place on Earth where you can see two continents and two great bodies of water all coming together. I just love that thought. And there you got tide rips, you got little fish, you got big fish, you got fishermen, you got lots of transportation, you got Muslims coming here and Christians going there, and you got fortresses, and you got the British Empire, and it's just right there when it comes together. Okay, when you're crossing Khyber Pass, you're leaving the arid, monochrome Islam, ever since Istanbul. Monochrome, arid, a forest of minarets with a cacophony of calls to prayer. It's a beautiful thing. And then you reach the end of that, and ahead of you is this lush, drenched, green, monsoon-soaked world of the Hindu world, 1 billion Hindus. And it was really pronounced to be able to go from arid to lush monsoon, go from Islam to Hindustan. And when we got to the border, it was one of those most incredible high-five moments. I don't even know why, but we both knew India was coming home for some reason. Might have been something to do with the British Empire and the infrastructure and the English language being the lingua franca in India for tourism and commerce. It might have been going from kind of stern and holy Islam to fragrant and delicate and luscious Hinduism. I don't know. But there was something about it, and we stepped into India, and we were just both really, really happy. It was a beautiful moment. Oh, baby. Now, along the way, we were learning, as you do, the importance of meeting people. And this is one of those things that I really preach a lot nowadays in my travels. Be an extrovert, you got to meet people. And Gene and I were pretty good at it. If you saw a whole bunch of med students sitting in a circle under a tree in Pakistan, you could sit down there and assume we are interesting. That's a very important assumption. Assume you are interesting. And you just became more interesting in the last month. As we travel, people want to talk to us. And it's more important than ever that we get out there and talk. I love the idea when we travel, we get to know each other. And we need to embrace that opportunity. We need to make things happen. If you assume we're interesting, we are, you will then be more accessible and you'll have more connections, and it really carbonates the whole experience. I'm really, as I mentioned, into this idea that the more context you bring to your sightseeing, the more valuable the sightseeing experience is. For decades, I've been talking about budget tricks. My favorite budget trick now is better understand what you're looking at. And it's twice as rewarding. It's a better value. I had some inkling about the importance of this way back then when I was 23 years old, because the last quarter of my time at the University of Washington, I actually designed a class. We had this program where you could get a professor and propose a class, and the professor would teach it to you. And it was a 5-credit course that I designed called Village India, in anticipation of this trip, because I understood the complexity of Indian culture and how it is really fundamentally kind of a village world. And I wanted to understand the rhythm of life and how the village was all woven together and everything. And it was a very good thing to take to study. And it's just a very rewarding thing to be knowing about. Understand a little about the religion. Jean had a degree in comparative religious studies, which is really helpful for us as we visited holy places from different religions. I work very hard not to judge other faiths. It's hard to understand how 800 million Hindus can feed their cows better than their kids, but I don't judge it. I do whatever I can not to judge it. There's probably some complicated rationale for this that I don't understand. Maybe it goes way back to when they were living in a world where there was no trees, and the critical source of fuel was cow pies, and they had to work into their sensibilities, take care of the cows, so you'll have fuel, so you can keep your family warm and cook your food. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's something about that. But I just want to cut other religions slack. I don't accomplish anything by condemning another faith, even if it makes no sense at all to me. I want to go into those holy places not being ethnocentric. I mean, that was something I was thinking about way back then. Now, as a tour guide, I'm trying to walk that talk in Europe. For years, I went to St. Peter's Basilica, and I was pissed off. I was really angry. How much did this thing cost? And who are all these saints? Where are they in the Bible? And all this gilding. What about poor and hungry people? What would Jesus do? Park your Protestant sword at the door. Come on. Go in as a temporary Roman Catholic. Appreciate it on its terms. Not on 2025, 500 years ago. This is the best they could do to glorify God when people were just mystified by the whole thing. Try to cut it some slack. That really serves you well. It really serves you well. A great religion to learn about is the Sikh faith. And their holiest place is Amritsar, where they have the Golden Temple. And they're proud of being hospitable to travelers and strangers. And that hospitality was so clear at the Golden Temple. I just loved my visit there. And from there, we headed north to Kashmir. And Kashmir is a place that's been very caught up in civil strife and war, because it's ruled, India and Pakistan originally was under England. It was all just messed up together. India got its freedom, and they decided to send all the Muslims here and all the Hindus there so we could have it, purified or whatever. It was a tough thing, heartbreaking thing. But then you got East and West Pakistan, or Pakistan and Bangladesh, and you got Hindu India. Well, in the north, they were unable to divide it. And you've got Kashmir, which is ruled by Hindus, but populated by Muslims. And that's why there's been war in Kashmir. And it is paradise on earth when you get there. I mean, look at this. This is, we knew even from Seattle that we'll need a vacation from our vacation, and it's going to be in Kashmir, baby. So we headed up there, and we just, you get into Srinagar and you meet a kid like this, and he takes you on a paddle boat, and you go shopping for your houseboat. And 100 years ago, the British, mucky mucks and the Mughals, or whatever you call it, the nobility of India, they would leave the squalor of the lowlands during the hot time of year, and they would retreat to the north, up into the mountains, and they'd live on these houseboats. And we shopped, and we found Muzaffar's houseboat. Oh, man, it was a nice houseboat. And we had our veranda on the roof. We had our family that lived in the bushes behind us. And it takes a while for kids 23 years old to get comfortable with people your parents' age serving you. But, India is full of people serving people. And we just actually got kind of spoiled, I'll tell you. compared to where we were for the last few weeks. This was like, we couldn't believe it, man. We're in hog heaven. And it was just idyllic as could be. This picture really, really captures it. Oh, God. And we would just sit there sipping our tea, watching the world glide by. The world came to us, Kashmir. We wanted a little more action, so we went up in the high country from there in a little mountain location called Gulmarg. And from there, we hired some horses, and we went adventuring. And I'll never forget, we came upon a family so off the grid. It's like they didn't quite know how to even deal with us, but they were curious about us. They welcomed us, and we got to go in and just hang out with them for a little while. And it was such a treat. And it was also thought-provoking because they're so off the grid, but they just seemed so together. Well, moving on from there, we flew to Delhi. And Delhi is the capital of the biggest democracy on the planet. Imagine a billion people turning out to vote and so on. I remember when we took the flight, it was a fascinating flight. We flew from Srinagar to Delhi, and it was a ramshackle old airplane. And I remember when I got up to go to the bathroom, I got to the toilet, and I could look through the toilet and see the farmland below. I just was mesmerized by this. And then it occurred to me, I'm about to fertilize. And then I'm sitting on the toilet, and I look at the decal on the wall next to me, and it's a stick figure that shows a person standing on the rim with a red line over it. You don't stand on the rim. You actually put your dirty butt on the dirty thing that other dirty butts have been on. This is how they do it in the West. But the sensibility there would be, oh no, my goodness, I would rather stand on it and squat over it, you see. And they had to have that decal. And that was a moment that reminded me how unknowingly ethnocentric I am. I thought it was the norm to sit on a toilet. And then I learned we are the oddballs on this planet who need to sit on the toilet. And later on, I noticed how people, they sit on their haunches effortlessly. I've been in towns where there's one TV on a pole in the square, and everybody sits around on their haunches watching it. They don't even bother to have chairs because they're all comfortable just sitting on their haunches like you and I probably couldn't. So this is just one of the reasons I love India. People ask me, what's your favorite country? Thinking I'm going to say France or Italy or something like that. India, why is that? Well, it humbles my ethnocentrism. It boxes my self-assuredness. It rearranges my cultural furniture. I love it. It reminds me I don't know the norms. I thought I knew music. There's cut time. There's waltz time. There's 4/4 time. I thought I knew meter or mode. There's happy, major, and sad, minor. And then you listen to Indian music and it just sounds like jumble. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, let's be fair here. It's probably just as sophisticated as the Beethoven or the Mozart that I love. And it is. But it doesn't have anything to do with mode or meter. That's pretty trippy. Wow, what is it? We don't know. But it's just as good as ours. Isn't that exciting? That there could be something like that. On my next trip, I bought a sitar. I never played it, but I just was so fascinated by it, I bought a sitar. I bought a sitar and I bought a squat toilet. I actually took a squat toilet home. I remember it was in a box with a bunch of hay, and I got it to Seattle, and the guy in the customs says, "What's in the box?" I said, "It's a squat toilet." And he said, "Okay." But we wanted people to understand that because you did occasionally see that in Europe. It's for my office. All right. Well, we did our best to disrespect all the cultural treasures in India. We're just two 23-year-old jerks, okay? So totally unguarded, totally uncensored in the book. And we just were having a blast, not appreciating all of the high culture. It's like somebody let out the zoo on the streets. There's so many big animals roaming around. But we wanted to travel with abandon. That's something that, I love that word abandon in the context of travel. We don't do a lot of things with abandon these days. But if you travel with abandon, young people can do that better than older people, I think. I wonder if I could do it now. I mean, I don't think I could. but we certainly wanted to travel with abandon. And I wanted to write a poem about it. That's the beautiful thing about a 60,000-word journal. It is a poem, a love note to the experience you're having. Wow. And we wanted to connect with those villages, having taken that Village India class. We wanted to have a little culture shock. And what I do in that case is I get on a bus in a big city and I just go out of the town. I get on a smaller bus and I head out into the middle of nowhere. And my goal is to get off the bus where everybody on the bus goes, oh no, excuse me, no tourist has ever gotten off on this spot. That's where I want to get off, thank you. And we did. And we found ourselves in a little hamlet. And what do? Well, it's a cultural scavenger hunt. You find a guy who's got a barber shop under a tree with one stool, you get a shave. The whole town is going to be entertained for 25 cents. Look at the cute little wooden prop on the back of Gene's head there. I mean, this is just great. We were walking out in the countryside, and I saw a bunch of women carrying, big bundles of cow's salad. And I thought, nothing wrong with going up and see if I can help out. And I'll never forget walking up to this woman. We're laughing and smiling and namasteing. And I say, I'm going to help you. So we bring it over, and we were just like this far from each other. And she's like, she's never experienced this before. Some guy from the who knows where coming in, going to carry. And then I'll never forget struggling 8 or 10 steps with this and then saying, okay, you can have it back now. Those are moments. You can have those anywhere in your travels. You can have them wherever you travel. And some people are good at it, some people aren't. If you see a guy thrashing wheat, ask him if you can do his job for a few minutes. You can do that. He probably still remembers that American that came and wanted to ride around the hay. Dress local. Get into the sort of hierarchy of society. Get to know what the impoverished nobility is all about. When you go to Europe, you find impoverished nobility. They're land rich, but cash poor. So every Wednesday and every Friday, they open their chateau up to the tourist. You pay $10 to go in and see their place so they can pay their rent and fix their roof, or pay the taxes and fix their roof. Well, the same thing is true in India. You got these Maharajas' palaces, and they rent them out for like Airbnb. And here we are. We think of ourselves as poor kids, just ragamuffin backpackers, but we got enough money to stay in a Maharaja's palace. And when we get there, there's the rickshaw man. And we don't want to go inside for 4 hours and have our rickshaw man waiting for us. Don't you have anything better to do? Time is money. Now just go away. We don't need you to be waiting. Oh, I will be here. When you need a ride, I am your man. I will be here. Get out of here. We don't want to go on your bike, so just leave us alone. 4 hours later, we step out. Hello, I'm here. Can I take you somewhere, And it occurred to me, one thing stressful about India to me is their fundamental approach to time is different than ours. For us, time is a valuable resource. We think about how we talk about time. We spend it, we save it, we invest it, we waste it. Everything we talk about time, it's like we even say time is money. In India, time is like bubble gum. You just play with it. And a bureaucrat knows he's got you, rich and powerful American, where he wants you. He can just hang you up because you're anxious to get moving, and he's got the key. He's got the stamp. He cannot give you that stamp until he's good and ready. And it's a very stressful thing. That's kind of my culture shock when I'm in India, and it's a constructive little bit of stress. You got to struggle in a place like India with the caste system, and it can be so heartbreaking. I mean, as a kid, it's heartbreaking now, but as a kid who had never thought much about realities on this planet, to see people from the beggar caste whose parents intentionally mutilate them out of love so they can, throughout their lives, be more effective beggars and not starve. If they had beautiful-looking kids that were perfectly formed, nobody would give them any money, and they'd be beggars. So they do this wretched thing to these kids, and for the rest of their lives, they push a metal tin with their head with a colorful bird sitting on their shoulder, and people throw coins into their tin. Wow. That is a harsh look at the real world. And I think it's important for us to get out and understand that. Try my best not to judge it, but it is heartbreaking. There's something about the caste system I would like an intellectual person from that culture to explain to me, but I think there is a rationale for the caste system that made sense, at least until modern times, and now they're maybe stuck with it in a sort of a inertia way. But I was starting to think now about the gap between rich and poor and structural poverty. And it's something that little kernel was happening here that I would later clue more into. Just from a decency point of view, it's odd to give somebody 25 cents and have them sweating and biking you all around town for half an hour. And our view in many cases was just this, you know. But that was the reality in India, and we got around a lot by rickshaw. I never know how to transition to this slide. But when you go to a temple, it's distracting because you're supposed to be thinking about God, and you see all these 3D reliefs of, it's like the Kama Sutra. And, well, I went to a lot of temples, let's just put it that way. So, it's intense. Let's just put it that way. It's intense. You're out in this incredible nonstop commotion, people staring at you, animals are on the loose, beggars, you name it. And when you need a break, the cinema. It's a godsend. It costs you 50 cents or whatever. I'm just pulling, it's just dirt cheap, whatever it is. And you step in, it's air conditioned, it's cool anyways. Nobody's staring at you, it's dark, the focus is on the screen. I don't speak Hindi, but the Bollywood melodramas are so predictable, you don't need to know the words, you understand the plot. And it's just delightful. That was a real relief for us to be able to go there. Another place of refuge was on train rides. I love train rides, and I love to take the little whistle-stop trains that go to all the small towns, and every half an hour there's a stop, and we're there for 10 minutes, and there's a parade that comes through the train. People, musicians, buskers, beggars, animals, you name it. It's just this amazing, amazing parade. And I don't want to be down there in the middle of it because I'm part of the scene. I'd like to look down at it, and people populate the luggage rack on an Indian train in the cattle car part of the train. And every 5 feet, there's a different body up where you're supposed to put your bags. I liked the spot just next to the door. The trains would go with the door open to have a breeze, and I could look out the window and see the flooded monsoon countryside. It was just beautiful. And then at every town, I'd look down and I'd see this amazing parade of India. That was a good moment to be a part. And also, our hotel rooms were refuges. We invented a game called fan baseball. And we'd be laying on our beds, and we would crumple up paper into hard little baseballs, and you had the fan going like this on the roof. And you lob your baseball up there, and if the fan hit it to that wall, it was a single, a double, or a triple. And if you could get the ball to actually stop at the little plate where it's not moving, that was a home run, okay? So that was we spent a lot of time just vegging out on the bed playing fan baseball. Benares is a most holy place for Hindus. People want to die there and have their body burned and the ashes tossed into the holy Ganges River. Tourists, just flat out touristic voyeurism, you get up at the crack of dawn, you get in a boat, and they float down the river where people are doing all of their religious rituals on the steps of the Ganges. And, you know, it's part of the local industry. There's a lot of gawking tourists and a lot of people doing their thing, ignoring each other. And it was a fascinating experience. And then you had that omnipresent bluff with smoke coming over it. And, you know, that's where they're burning the bodies. People want to die here. So a lot of people are very, very decrepit, waiting to die. And when they do die, you burn the body. And all of the tourist groups would go up there, and you'd see the bodies. And it was awkward to take a photograph of this, but I guess I thought maybe in 40 years I'll want to share that at the Dominican college. But it was like I've made a lot of fires with logs in the past, and you put a log in, and after a while it goes crunk, and then you shove it in further, and it crumples, and you shove it in further. And that was my takeaway from this. Crumple, shove in further. Crumple, shove in further. Gather the ashes, throw them into the river. Monsoon, boy, oh boy. It's a joyful time when the water's coming down, that's for sure. And the water was, I looked at the map, it's where are all the lakes? But then when monsoon's there, it's almost one big lake, it seemed to me. We got into Nepal sneaking through the back door, and we ended up in Kathmandu. Now, Kathmandu is the end of the hippie rainbow. That's what all these kids along the route were heading for. And it's one of those places that just does not disappoint. That's the amazing thing. We got there, and it's where Hindustan meets Buddhism. There's something very beautiful about it, and you lose yourself in Kathmandu. Like in India, English is the language of travel, the common language. They have a very charming way with struggling with the language. Hotel Siddhartha for homely. Hotel Siddhartha, please get here. And this is where you have the freak street and all the hippies hanging out. And this is where people just end up. They stay there until their visa expires. Then they have to go to Goa, which is like Kathmandu on the water, and then back to Nepal. Back and forth, back and forth. When we think about the marijuana on the Hippie Trail, I don't think it was that much, marijuana. I think it was basically part of freedom. People just wanted to be free from everything about their regular life back home, and marijuana was part of the culture. In India, in Nepal, and Afghanistan, it's sold like herbs in the market. And we had plenty of opportunities to have beautiful experiences while high. We would get a dugout canoe and go canoeing, and then we'd get to the far side of the lake, and we'd be intrigued by what I called an herbal essence waterfall halfway up the hill in the jungle. You beach your canoe, and you want to get to that herbal essence waterfall, and you got to go through the jungle. And I remember venturing through the jungle, and then we got deep in the thick of it, and suddenly we realized we were under attack by countless leeches. Black, evil, thirsty for my blood, head over tail, slinky leeches coming at me, and coming at me. And it just seemed really scary. And when we got back to the hotel, we did realize that a few of them bit us, but that was just part of the whole adventure of being in the jungle, in the Himalayas. Another part of the excitement was monkeys. Monkeys love glasses. Monkeys, if I'm paranoid about anything, it's monkeys, because I don't want to get scratched or bit, because then I got to decide, am I going to get rabies shots, you know? And when you're in the middle of a country so far from home, that would be a really difficult decision to make. But there was this place I'll never forget called Pie and Chai. And Pie and Chai was my hippie nirvana. And it was the ultimate little coffee shop, tea shop. And it was at the edge of town in a meadow. You're already high in the Himalayas. You got the peaks all around you. You got a medieval pizza oven, and coming out of this old rustic brick oven, were incredible apple pies, right? Literally out of the oven. And you got this mishmash of different long-haired characters, philosophers, poets, freaks, lovers, somebody passed out, and they're playing the perfect rock and roll music. It just couldn't be nicer. Except you got these monkeys up above that want to eat your glasses, and my comfort food was glucose biscuits, little digestive biscuits. You know, when you go to England, you get those digestives. I love them. And all across India, they have them in little travel packages, just, for a little snack. And that was my comfort food because it was totally safe to eat it. It was packaged. It was English. And the monkey, I'm having my glucose biscuit. He wants my biscuit. He comes, and I have to give it to him. And then he sits there just above me eating the biscuit. And then he comes after me for the whole package. And I knew he was hell-bent on getting my package. And he got it. And that's just the edge on Pie and Chai. But it was, all in all, that was a beautiful, beautiful moment. wandering the streets of Kathmandu, everywhere you turn, there's a moment like this. You're breaking into beautiful little vignettes of the culture. Gorgeous people shots. Freaky people that you just wish you could talk to. And darling little kids clasping their hands together saying, Namaste, I salute your virtues. And then you say Namaste back, I salute your virtues. So we went from Istanbul on the Pirates bus to Tehran, run off the road here, so it took a long time to get all the way to there. Went across the north of Iran to that godforsaken border, decided we're going to make it at Herat, the point of no return. All-day bus ride to Kabul, over Khyber Pass, a little into Sikh country, Amritsar, up to Srinagar and Kashmir, fly to Delhi, do all the touristy stuff in India, and finish in Kathmandu. And from there, we flew back to Europe. All right, so thank you. Thank you very much. You know, what I'd like to, I've got about another half an hour that I want to talk about, and that's just the so what sort of thing. What came out of that, all right? So I'll limit it to that. I don't want to keep you too long, but the last part is kind of like the whole moral of the story. I would like to just take a 3-minute stretch, not a break, but just stand up, shake it out, talk about your Hippie Trail experiences, and then we'll carry on. Class, all right. So the last words in the book that you've all purchased, thank you very much, is I returned home, got a haircut that I just added, turned my recital hall into a lecture hall and started a small travel business, okay? So, again, I was a piano teacher, I loved it, and this was my recital hall, and it was just delightful. All the kids would play for their parents, and you can see on the back of the wall, I had what was a slide screen I painted on there, and I decorated it with the musical staff, but I would take that down and show travel stuff. And eventually I realized I got to do one or the other. So I said goodbye to my piano students, and I turned it into a little company called Europe Through the Back Door, and I would give talks up there. And the very season I came home from that trip, I'm putting this together just from the date on here, 78, 79, the experimental college. So that must have been my handout for my class, inspired by that lousy guy the spring before that didn't prepare for his travel class, right? This was a very nice handout for this little course. And you can see I even turned whales into a human being. And if you can read that, it says, "Feel my fjords, caress my castles." Experiential travel. So what is interesting for me is to see how coming home from that experience, letting my beloved piano students go, committing myself to being a travel writer, 2 years later writing Europe Through the Back Door, probably 4 years after that being invited down to Corte Madera to give a talk at Book Passage, and just doing what I do ever since. I'm doing the same thing now that I did back then, but I've got 100 mission-driven, wonderful colleagues. We've got technology beyond our wildest dreams to amplify our teaching, but it's still the fundamental beauty of traveling. I was learning how to... Thank you. Thank you. I was learning from my own experience. When I got ripped off, I celebrate. They don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam and put it into my books, this kind of thing. I was finding discoveries. Like to this day, I say I hit and I miss and I mitt and I hiss, and I bring home the hits and I write them up so you can have a better batting average. That's why you invest in a guidebook. A guidebook is a $25 tool for a $3,000 experience. If it's any good, it pays for itself on the shuttle in from the airport, you see. So I would find places like this, and I'd think, more people should know about this. And I'd find places like this. When I first went to this place, I mean, now there's T-shirts that say Venice, Florence, Rome, and Cinque Terre, you know. But when I first went there, it was a poverty-stricken little chunk of the Riviera that nobody went to. And now it's very, very popular. It's an interesting ethical issue. Have I ruined it? Well, ask the people who are earning their living now off of tourism. No. Ask the lots of tourists that go there have the time of their life. No. But it is a different reality now than when I discovered it, of course. But that's what I would discover, and I would write them up in my book. This is the first edition of my first book, and it was self-published. And the first half was the lecture of my travel class, and the last half of the book was individual chapters on my 20 favorite discoveries, the back doors, like those last 2 shots I just showed you. And back then, I would do everything every summer to try and learn stuff. And this was like, if you've ever had one of my classes, you hear me say, imagine being high in the Swiss Alps, tight-roping on a ridge, literally tight-roping on a ridge. On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible alpine panorama anywhere, the Eiger, Monk, and Jungfrau cut-glass peaks. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alphorn, announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain that is open, it's just around the corner and the coffee schnapps is on. Oh, that's a beautiful moment. I had that moment when I was that kid. I just went back a couple years ago on that same ridge. It's still magic. It's still there. These lessons persevere. These lessons have legs. You got to be an extrovert. Just like when I was doing the guys' hay. I was hiking in the Italian Riviera, and I was visiting a church, and the monk that runs the abbey starts up a conversation with me. After a few words, he says, I've got some homemade limoncello. Would you like to come into the abbey and help me drink it? Well, si, signor. I got drunk with an Italian monk. I mean, that is quite a moment. Anybody can have these moments. We've got to get out of our comfort zone. It could be as simple as escargot. If you have always not liked escargot, but you've not had it in France, you don't know what escargot is. You got to go there. Get out of your comfort zone and broaden your horizons. You need to be a cultural chameleon. You need to change physically from country to country. This is what I was picking up on that hippie trail. I never work all day long in Seattle and go home and crave a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. But I don't let a sun go down on a Greek island without having a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. You see, when I'm in Greece, ouzo tastes right. And that's something you pick up, I think, when you travel. And that whole notion of understanding what you're looking at, taking that Village India class. You need to know what an aqueduct is if you're going to the south of France. This is the famous aqueduct at Avignon, Pont du Gard. Not really. It's the most scenic bridge in a 30-mile-long aqueduct engineered by Romans 1,800 years ago to bring water into the city of Nîmes without using the sweat of peasants but gravity to get it there. Engineered so the water loses 1 inch every 100 yards for 30 miles. A little man-made square river on the top of that structure. Can you imagine the jubilation on that day, 1,800 years ago, when water gushes into Nîmes? You lost the war, the Romans won, but now you got stability. You got great roads, and you got running water. It could be worse. You see, we've humanized it. That's what I love about teaching travel and being able to do that. So this is the flagship of all my books. It's in its 40th edition now from that first edition, and that's where I put these lessons. Now, the way I've been able to build my business is by doing tours. That's really where the serious income is. Taking 30,000 Americans to Europe subsidizes all the guidebooks and all the TV shows, you know. I started doing the tours before I was doing a lot of books, and this was the handbook for the tours. And I would go all over the place and give a lecture in a place like this, and I'd have the tour handbooks on the stage. During the break, I would hope that people would thumb through the tour handbook and like what they see and take the tour. Time and time again, during the break, they'd thumb through the handbook, they'd like what they see, and they took the book. This little handbook was driving decent people to theft. It needed to be available for retail purchase. I'm a decent person, but I would have stole that because he was not selling it. I would have paid for it. So the next year, I decided I'm going to put everything I know about doing the tour into the handbook so people can do my tour without me. It'll be a little staple-bound book. It'll cost $3.50. It'll be called Europe in 22 Days. Huh. My publisher liked that, so they started publishing it, and then we get a whole line of these books, all of them, all of the brains of the tour that I lead, designed so people can buy the little book and do the tour without me. My friend said, hey, you're going to lose your business. You're telling everybody how to do your magical tours. Oh, no. There's plenty of room to do it on your own or hire me to do the driving, you see. So that was sort of the beginning of this. And we started branching out, and pretty soon we had 22-day trips all over Europe. And that is the birth of the dominant line of guidebooks in the United States today. I can't believe it, but my publisher is so proud when he comes up to Seattle from the Bay Area here, and they tell us our sales figures, and for every city in every country, our book is outselling the competition combined. And that's... I don't think it's because our books are so great. It's that publishing has lost track of what makes a good guidebook. And these great guidebook lines have been gutted by corporate purchases, and now they're run and done by people that don't travel. They don't understand what a guidebook's for. And it's really sad. And we're the old-fashioned guys that are by travelers and for travelers, and we actually visit everything in the book with every edition. And, you know, we have 300 or 400 days of research every year to keep our guidebooks up to date. 300 or 400 days of research. And I'm so thankful for that and proud of that with my company. Now we do guidebooks, or we do tours all over Europe, and that helps us to know this area. It helps us scout for our TV shows. It all works together really well. The tours that we do, the philosophy is we want to be so efficient with your time that you will experience 50% more per day than if you did it on your own, and you will enjoy doing it with a group of people. And our profit is based on me talking 25 people into sharing one vehicle. You see, you can think of the economy right there. If 25 people are renting cars or 25 people are taking train tickets to do this route, and instead, if they all team up and go into a big bus with a driver, and I organize that, that's a huge amount of savings. And I get all that money. Now, what I do then, my challenge is to take all the other expenses so that somebody will look at that and realize eating, sleeping, sightseeing, entertainment, transportation, it's all costs the same, but I need to share it with 24 people on a big bus, and I'll be happy because it's not stressful and I accomplish 50% more per day. And then the secret trick is for me to sell it in a way that shapes the clientele so that it is fun to travel with people on the bus, you see. And that's what we're able to pull off. And that's a whole other lecture. But that's just the fun of doing these tours. And to this day, I'm so thankful for my team of guides. These are 150 European guides. And with our philosophy about doing the tours, we make all of our money up front rather than getting you in the door and then taking you sightseeing for a fee, getting kickbacks on your shopping, and angling for tips. That's the frustrating thing about organized tourism. You get suckered onto a tour bus that's too cheap to be true, and it is too cheap to be true. They haven't been able to pay their guides or make any money, and then they nickel and dime you over the course of the experience, you see. These guys choose to go with us because they're totally paid up front. There's no tipping, no kickbacks, nothing like that. And we have a more, I think, sophisticated clientele when it comes to recognizing that this could be a good value. So when we started doing our TV show, it spread the word more and more. I have been able to use the TV show to really focus on that. The more understanding you bring to your sightseeing, the more you get out of it. My favorite project over the last years is the 6-hour mini-series on the story of Europe. 6 hours from the pyramids to Picasso. And if you want 6 hours to really invest in your trip, I can't think of a more delightful, I'm sorry, it sounds immodest, but I just love this 90-page script that takes you from the prehistoric cave paintings right up to the street art of today in this beautiful arc. And thank God for public television, because I can write a script that assumes an attention span, that respects people's intelligence, that's driven by a passion not for keeping advertisers happy, but by a passion for just helping people get out there and embrace and celebrate the world in all of its art. So, my good buddy Gene, I've been so blessed to have great collaborators over the years. And Gene, when I've ever written a book that is weighty from an art and a history point of view, you know Gene's involved. He's a co-author. And he's just a brilliant guy. He lives down the street from me. He's the man who's produced all 65 of our tours on our app, Rick Steves Audio Europe. And it's just nice to have a good travel partner. I've always thought, everybody's wondering about a travel partner. Do you have to have a travel partner and so on? The loneliest people I found on the road are people with the wrong travel partner. I'd much rather go alone than with the wrong travel partner. That's not selfish, that's just smart. And the best way to go is with a good travel partner. So if you got a good travel partner, that's a great thing. Enjoy it. And with Gene, I've got a good way. So, did I become a guru? No. Did I start taking my writing more seriously? Yes. And after that whole hippie trail, when I decided I'm not going to inspire kids to enjoy classical music, I'm going to inspire kids to enjoy traveling and celebrating the world's culture, I've come to think of travel as more than just being tourists. I love this notion that you can be a tourist, a traveler, or a pilgrim. Basically, you can think of the road as playground, as school, or as church, or synagogue, or mosque. And you don't need to be all of one or all the other. The cool thing is, you can finesse it the way that you want to. But I think the default for people is just to be a mindless tourist. And the tourist industry would love it because they make more money off of people who are just dumbed down and going to the beach, you know. There's no incentive for getting you turned on to the art and the history and the meaning of travel and the value of travel. That's not good business, but that's good travel. So I like to mix it up, and that's what we can all do. We can all be a little more spiritual, we can all be a little more poetic, we can all be a little more true to ourselves as we travel and get far away from home. And for me, that's a beautiful thing. That's what my book, Europe, Travel as a Political Act, is all about. And if I think about the eurekas that got me tuned into this idea, even before my Hippie Trail trip, I did this. I was in Norway with relatives, with my parents, looking at, we were just in Oslo, and I was just a 14-year-old kid, my first time in Europe. And we were behind the Royal Palace in the big garden there, the big park, and my parents were just loving me. And I just thought, didn't make a lot of sense to me. They didn't have a lot of money. They were compromising hugely to take their little 14-year-old kid to Europe. And I was just kind of a pill. I didn't appreciate it. And they could have had a much better time without me. But they were loving me, like inexplicably. It was just, this was love. And then I looked out in that park, and it was speckled with other parents loving their kids as much as my parents loved me. And it occurred to me, this world is home to billions of equally lovable little children of God. What a lovely thought, you know? And that's a good takeaway when it comes to travel. You leave home and you realize you're not so precious. These kids over there are just as precious. It's a beautiful, if fundamental, understanding. So in our travels now, we can open up and see the beauty of humanity. The most beautiful souvenir is to come home with that appreciation that the world is filled with beautiful people and with love and with hope and with people that we could get to know. We all have our own dreams. We have the American dream. They have the Sri Lankan dream. We all have our challenges and our baggage. We have our 9/11 baggage. Turkey would have its own baggage. I'll never forget being with on a Turkish tour in the shadow of Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey. I love taking groups to eastern Turkey where we were on that Pirates bus ride. And there's not a lot of turnstile sites there at all. It's a cultural scavenger hunt. We're tooling around with our Turkish guide looking for something to stop the bus for. Here's a high school stadium filled with kids having a pep rally. Let's see what's going in. Stop the bus, go on. 100 kids thrusting their fist up in the sky and singing, "We are a secular nation. We are a secular nation." I asked my guide, "What's going on? Don't they like God here?" And she said, "Oh, we love God here, but considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over the border to our east in Iran, we're very concerned about the fragile and precious separation of mosque and state here in our society, and these students are having a pep rally for pluralism." Teenagers in Turkey in the shadow of Mount Ararat having a pep rally for pluralism? Who'd have thunk the separation of mosque and state? This is exciting to think that other societies have struggles we didn't even know were struggles. And we learn that when we travel, and that is a beautiful thing. When we travel, we get to know the enemy. I think this is is it in the Bible or what? Get to know your enemies. Know thy enemy. It's a beautiful thing. When we go where our government says we're not supposed to go, we contribute to peace. When I go to Cuba, when I go to Nicaragua, when I go to Iran, when I go to Palestine, it makes it tougher for their propaganda to dehumanize us. And when I come home, it makes it tougher for my country's propaganda to dehumanize them. If we all traveled before we voted, our world would be in a much better state, and so would the United States of America. So when I was in Iran, going back as an adult, after having slummed through there earlier, I have a chance to give that some thought. I have a daughter about this age when I traveled through there, and I look at these kids, and they're just as fun-loving and free-spirited and deserving as my daughter, you know? And for us to get to know these people, it's so exciting. It is so exciting. And if you get a chance, watch my show on Iran. It's just the most eye-opening thing. 70 million Iranians. We're hell-bent on bombing them sooner or later. Why did I go there? Well, I used to tell my friends, because I think it's good style to know people before you bomb them. It should hurt. I'm not a flower child. You got to have a military. You got to kill innocent people sometimes. It's a tough world. But it should hurt. And right now, we don't know anything about Iran. We just think they're all evil. They're not all evil. They're beautiful people. When I was in Iran, on the last day of our filming, a professional woman came over to me and said, "Are you an American journalist?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I want you to go home and tell the truth. We're strong, we're united, and we just don't want our little girls to be raised like Britney Spears." I thought it was about the cost of gas, of oil. Wasn't that what's on your mind? No. We don't want to have our little kids hijacked and have your values. I thought about that. This is the cool thing about traveling. It's like fishing. You get little nibbles and then you catch some big ideas. Whoa, who elected Khomeini and Ahmadinejad and all these guys that until recently seemed like unimaginable crackpots? Who elected them? Was it the sophisticates in Iran that appreciated the fact that miniskirts are shorter in Tehran than they are in Paris? Of course not. Who gave 51% to Ayatollah? It was not the coastal elites. It was the small town, less educated fundamentalists. Don't get me wrong, good people, riddled with fear, driven by love. What about that Britney Spears? Why doesn't she want her to build Britney Spears for her daughter? She's worried her daughter, if we do another regime change, will be a boy toy, a crass materialist, and a drug addict. That scares the parents of Iran to no end. And I don't blame them, you know. This is something we can talk about. This is something we can learn from. And this is something we can also look at our own society when we think of small town, less educated fundamentalists. Good people, driven by fear and powered by their love. It's exciting. And you wouldn't have these thoughts if you didn't travel. You wouldn't know the humanity of Palestine. All we see is a bombed-out Gaza. There's 6 million Palestinians. These girls are Palestinian university students at the university in Ramallah. Their world is turned upside down right now. Why? Because of us. It's a complicated mess. We're at the table, and we have some responsibility. As far as I'm concerned, every bomb that falls and every bullet that flies has my name on it as an American taxpayer, and I want to be knowing, why are we funding this? What is going on? Walls. We hear a lot about walls lately, you know, and there are a lot of walls on this planet, both physical walls and metaphorical walls. I feel very strongly from my travels that if you haven't talked to people on both sides of that wall, you got no business weighing in on that issue. You don't know what's going on if you've only talked to people on, you think about which wall you're going to think about, one side of the wall. Israel, Palestine, Protestants, Catholics, you know, Berlin Wall. You got a metaphorical wall in this country painted blue and red. We got to talk to people on the other side of the wall too, you know. It's called dual narrative. It's a dual narrative approach to tourism. And we can do that because walls, they have an unintended consequence. This wall between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, it was built to protect Israelis from violence coming in from West Bank. Okay, let's just say that was legit. That was justifiable. Today, the unintended consequence of that wall is it keeps the younger generations saddled with their parents' baggage and no opportunity to talk to each other. And that perpetuates the problem. The younger generations would like to get away from their parents' baggage, but the parents are pretty good at not making that possible with these walls. The Irish did a great job of overcoming their troubles with a concentrated effort to get the younger people in the Catholic and the Protestant community going to camp together in the summer, working together, dancing together, learning together. That's the constructive way to deal with these walls. We could do it, but we're going to have a little more nuanced approach to things than what I see going on right now. Walls. You got a choice, walls or bridges. The irony is, the people who want walls are doing it because they are so afraid they want to be safer. And that's not a good way to be safe. That's a good way to be less safe in the future. What makes us safer is bridges. We're 4% of this planet. There's 96% out there. The thought that we would withdraw from the world because we're afraid of the world is a big shame. Fear. Think of how we're riddled with fear these days. We used to say bon voyage. When I went on the Hippie Trail, my parents said bon voyage. Now what do people say? Have a safe trip. We'll pray for you. Are you sure you should be going over there considering all that's happening? When somebody tells me have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, well, you have a safe stay at home. Because where I'm going statistically is, and I know statistics are optional these days, but where I'm going statistically is safer than where you're staying. If you knew the risk, if you knew the statistics, you'd take your kids to Europe tomorrow. This is how I sell tours. Fear is for people who don't get out very much. The flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. It's a beautiful thing. And if you think about the most frightened people in our society, they are buried metaphorically in the deep center of this society of ours with no passports. And what shapes their worldview? Fear-mongering commercial TV news. This is a dangerous, dangerous situation, you know? If people could just get out there and get to know the world, we would have some hope about finding solutions to these problems. And it's all about bridges, as far as I'm concerned. I love bridges. And if we can come home from our travels and advocate for bridges instead of walls, I think our world will be a better place. Imagine if you were designing currency in Europe. You got 20 different countries. Whose president's going to go on the coin? Whose bird's going to go on the back of the bill? Well, that's complicated, but one thing they can do is have bridges. Look at the European currency. It's all iconic bridges. Beautiful, beautiful bridges bringing people together like travel. One of my favorite sites from my recent researching in Oslo is right there in front of the Nobel Peace Prize Center, where they give out that award, and it's called the Smiling Bench. You cannot sit on the Smiling Bench without coming together. Try as you might, you got to come together and talk to each other. And etched into the pavement in front of that is a quote by Nelson Mandela that says, "The most powerful weapon is talking to each other." And that's what I love about this smiling bench, you know? You can have that, and then you realize we all love gelato. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the impact of the United States deciding soft power is not worth $40 billion a year, the dismantling of USAID, okay? And I want to talk about it not in a love your neighbor kind of way, because I'm pretty realistic about it. In the privacy of the voting booth, the typical American, I don't care how big the cross on their lapel is, they don't vote for love your neighbor. They take into that voting booth fear and greed, self-interest. That's what you vote for. So I'm going to make a case for USAID, not love thy neighbor, but because it makes our world a more stable place and it makes our country more safe. It's a good investment. And this is it's a 1-hour TV special I produced 5 years ago called Hunger and Hope, Lessons Learned in Ethiopia and Guatemala. I think it's one of the most important things I've ever produced, and if you get a chance to watch it, because we're going to be talking about that going forward, please give it a look. It's free and you know how to find it. Along with my 1-hour show on Palestine and on Iran and on fascism, okay? There's your lessons. But I want to just give you a little primer here. Half of humanity, 4 billion people, is trying to live on $5 a day. That's okay. That's realistic. That's livable. 10% of humanity is living in what the United Nations calls extreme poverty, $2 a day. That's not okay. That should not be allowed. We could beat that. And we were on a trajectory to beat it until about a decade ago. Extreme poverty had been cut by 50% in one generation. And now it is ticking up because of COVID, climate change, conflict, and the United States pulling out of anything that has to do with helping desperately poor and hungry people, all right? Because we can't afford $40 billion for this. Now, when we think about the reality of living on $2 a day, you've got no running water. You spend half of your waking hours walking for water every day. You've got no electricity, no access to education or health care. You got a thatched roof with no chimney and an open fire on a dirt floor, all right? That's pretty tough. And that's the reality for 1,800 million people on our planet today. The average lot in life for women, and I imagine there's a few people in here that are into women's issues. I wish people took this a little more realistically. The average lot in life for women on this planet is to abandon their families every morning and walk for water and firewood. Many hours. This woman is not as old as she looks. It's heartbreaking for a woman to leave her kids in order to get water. But water is more important than taking care of your kids. That turns those kids into the grip of some angry forces, and it denies that woman the ability to raise her kids in a way that she would like to. I've been there. I've seen the modern aid doing amazing things. It's not your grandparents' aid. It's modern aid today. It is invested in women. It's invested in local ownership. It's working very hard to be around the corruption of different governments, and it makes communities filled with hope. And if you look at a person like a child like this, you see a little girl that has adequate nutrition for the first 1,000 days, she's not stunted. She will be able to produce for the rest of her life. If a child is unable to get good nutrition for the first 1,000 days, including prenatal, that child will be stunted and never be able to do what they were meant to do on this planet. That is tragic. That's a loss, and that's pretty cheap to remedy. We could remedy that as a leading society in this family of nations. I've learned in my travels that even if you're motivated only by greed, if you know what's good for you, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's just not a nice place to raise your kids. Even if you are wealthy enough and privileged enough to barricade your family behind designer fortifications, that's not anything to aspire to. I don't know how these oligarchs can be so filthy rich and not have any heart for people who are struggling. You reach a point where consuming more doesn't make you happier. So I'm just letting out a little plea for the selfish rationale for soft power. We spend $800 billion a year on hard power. It's our defense budget. It's supposed to make us safer. And that's good. Let's just say we've got $800 billion to make us safer. You reach a point where a little less hard power and a little more soft power is actually a better investment in stability and safety. Here's an example. For one extra soldier in the field, it costs $1 million a year. And that's necessary to a certain degree. But what is the cost of not having that $1 million a year available for soft power? For that money, you could drill 100 wells in 100 thirsty communities. And then all the mothers in all of those dusty little towns would stay home every morning. And instead of walking across the county to get their water, they would walk across the square. And when they pump that water in the morning, every morning, in that cool, safe, life-giving water comes out, what are they going to think? God bless America. God bless America. God bless America. That's $5,000 for a well to give every mom in that town the ability to stay home and keep their kids healthy and raise them. Why can't we find it in our little hearts to recognize the value of that? What do we need when we're as wealthy as we are right now? We could beat hunger on this planet. But what are we doing? We're pulling out and we're barricading ourselves behind walls. I could give you so many examples of how the world needs us. The world is inspired by us. The ideals of America are stronger than any one president. They are flickering and inspiring on the Hill, regardless of who's in the White House. When I travel in Europe, I find these opportunities, these examples. Filming in Burgundy in France, I'll never forget visiting a mom-and-pop chateau. I love these people whose families run this little chateau for generations. The sun's going down. I'm a little bit uptight. I just got to get on the roof and get a wide shot that we can have a glass of wine. Please, I got to get on the roof. No, we must have a glass of wine. No, I got to get, the sun's going. Have a glass of wine. We can do it. Okay, they bring out the wine. They bring out the cheese. They bring out the crackers. And then the children of the chateau bring out the precious 48-star American flag. And they, like a religious relic, they opened it up for us. And they say, this is the flag we hoisted over our town on that great day in 1945 when our village was freed from Nazi tyranny by American troops. And we will never let Americans into our chateau without pulling out our flag and thanking you and asking you to go home and tell your neighbors that we are so thankful for American valor and leadership and commitment to democracy and the ideals that make America great. Please, please go home and tell your neighbors that. Wow. We are taken over right now by a slogan, Make America Great Again. And we are pulling away from the other 96% of humanity, not understanding the complexity and the seriousness of the challenges that will confront us in the future. And we've got to be at the table to marshal the energy of the other 96% of humanity to do this stuff. But no, we're pulling back and we're walling off. Is that making America great? That's abandoning what makes America great, and that's the ideals of America. That's freedom and nations working together to give us a better future. That's making America great, and that's what you learn when you travel. So, I've had an exciting time in my life because I've got a grandson. Finally, I've got a grandson. And his name is Atlas. What a great, is that a good name or what? Now, a lot of people thought, wait till you have a grandchild, you'll get like more real about what really matters in life, you know? No. When I've got Atlas, I've got a keener awareness. When I see how happy my daughter is and how right it is for her to have the love and the support to raise a beautiful child with her husband, I know there are countless people all over this planet who have the same love, the same grandchildren, the same dreams. They can have that. We can help that work on our planet. When we travel, we get to know the beauty of this planet. That's what I'm so thankful for. Can you have that hippie trail today? Can you plant those seeds to be friends with our world? Well, you cannot go from Istanbul to Kathmandu through Iran and Afghanistan like we did, but you can have a hippie trail any number of ways. Again, Muhammad wanted us to go to his faithful to go to Mecca, not to go to Mecca, but to get away from home and to gain an appreciation of the beautiful diversity on our planet. That's why we travel. We travel to not be afraid of people like the people you meet on the road. Oh, baby. That little girl, she's 55 years old today if she's still around. What's her life like? What's it been like? Imagine, it's the Taliban. They're trying to evolve. We can help make a world where that evolution can happen on its terms. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Let me just finish with one of my favorite exercises as a tour guide. This is a dervish, you know, the whirling dervish, kind of like cruise ship entertainment. I love finding something that's a little bit freaky and for my tourists to learn about it and better appreciate it. So I'm in Turkey with one of our tour groups. My group's at the hotel. I'm running around town looking for a dervish. I'll just paraphrase this. I want to find a dervish so my group can learn about him whirling. I find a dervish, and I say, hi, I'm an American tour guide. I've got 20 tourists at the hotel. We'd love to watch you whirl. And he says, I'm not a photo op. I'm a monk. But if I can explain to you how I pray, you're welcome to watch. I say, great. When and where? Rooftop sundown. We'll be there. We gather on the roof. He comes out dressed up in his beautiful monk's outfit. He says, Merhaba, I'm a dervish. I think you Christians would call me a monk. My prophet, the guy I really focus on, is Mevlana. I think you call him Rumi. 5 times a day, I get dressed up in my robe, and I whirl myself into a meditative trance, wanting to become a conduit of God's love. And I think about Mevlana's teaching. I plant one foot in my hometown, my family, my community, and the other foot goes around and celebrates the diversity in God's great creation, far and wide. One arm goes up to accept the love of our heavenly Creator, and the other hand, like the spout on a tea kettle, goes down and showers God's love on His creation. And I meditate on that. And how can I be a conduit of God's love? And we watch him as he whirls and he loses himself in that trance. His head tilts over, his robe billows out. And as the tour guide, I watch him, and then I look over at my tourists, and I think of how we are all gaining a broader perspective now. We're a little less afraid, a little more connected, a little better understanding. And when we go home and take that sensibility with us and then implement it as citizens of this great democracy of ours, we're making travel a political act. And we're turning all of those little hippie trail ideas into everyday life today as we live out our time right here. I hope that is interesting for you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Woo! Thank you. Hey.